We're back and we're better. Welcome to episode 2, or rather, episode 1 of the Gift of Gab podcast, hosted by yours truly. Once again, if you are familiar, then welcome. Thank you for clicking on the video. If you're unfamiliar, then stay tuned because it's surely something interesting and it's surely something that will float your boat. Anyways, today's topic of conversation, I figure, or at least a good place to start, would be what makes someone a good speaker. Being that the name of this podcast is the Gift of Gab podcast, you would assume that the host is good at speaking. Maybe, I think so a little bit. So I'll go into depth about 5 principles that I think make someone a good speaker. But before that, we kind of have to introduce it, right? What is the first component of being a good speaker? Is it charisma? Maybe. Is it knowing a bunch of words? Not really, but maybe. Is it being able to tell a story? Very much could be. Absolutely. These are all valid answers. But in my personal opinion, I'd say the first step to being a good speaker is being a good listener. Because you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And that isn't by accident. We should be listening more than we speak. And the first language that we should get acquainted with is silence. That's deep, right? But you probably weren't expecting that. So, listening is essential to speaking, as, you know, you have to take in what you hear and you have to listen to yourself before you speak, you know? But there's a difference between hearing and listening, as people often use them interchangeably, but they're not really the same thing. Hearing is a very passive act. It is literally the sound entering your ears. Listening, on the other hand, is absolutely intentional, and it requires 2 things: intention as well as attention. Because to truly listen, there's levels to it. There's layers to listening, and the same difference between listening and understanding is the same exact difference that there is. I fucked it up. The same difference between listening and hearing is the exact same difference between knowing something and understanding something. I can know what something is. I can tell you that this something is made out of cement. But to understand it, I have to understand the ratios. I have to understand how much I'm mixing. I have to understand what temperature. I have to, I'm just making stuff up. But knowing is, again, passive. Whereas understanding something requires attention and intention. So before we get into these 5 principles, I need to get into the differences. So we all know what goes on in the mind, at least. The whole essence of speaking is bringing ideas and thoughts which are in here, which are often invisible, or pretty much always invisible, and making them visible in a way. It can be with art, it can be with drawing or painting, it can be with words. Oftentimes, that's how we express ourselves. So we all know what goes on in the mind, for at least most of us. We are able to articulate how we feel most of the time. For example, I can tell you I'm happy. I can tell you I'm sad. Sometimes I can even tell you why. Simple things. I'm happy because I'm starting a podcast. I'm sad because whatever, right? But what happens when you don't know? What happens when you don't know how you feel? Or when you don't know why you feel? Or when you don't know why you don't know? Or when you don't know how you don't know? And there's actually a difference between those last 2, so I'm going to repeat them again, just in case it went over your head. When you don't know why you don't know, and you don't know how you don't know. Yes, those are different questions. The why of ignorance is causal, whereas the how of ignorance is structural. Socrates said, "The truly ignorant man is the one who thinks he knows." There's a great level of wisdom in not knowing. Simply by not knowing or admitting that you don't know something, you are establishing a level of intelligence that most people aren't willing to take or to do, you know? Everyone in this day and age seems to have an opinion and they seem to believe they're qualified and, they want to get their input in, regardless of if they are totally uneducated or they're treading in waters that are foreign, right? So, there's 5 levels of ignorance. And I'll tell you how this ties into listening and hearing and understanding and speaking. Just hear me out though. The first level of ignorance is ignorance, right? Not knowing something. Everyone doesn't know everything. We're clearly ignorant to things. This is the base level. But from this are 2 levels of ignorance. So there's not knowing something, but then there's not knowing you don't know something and knowing that you don't know something. So there's the conscious ignorance and the unconscious ignorance. Then there's the why. The not knowing why you don't know, right? So there's things we are totally unaware of that we don't even know that we don't know, right? Can't really give you an example, just know that I don't know, right? But then there's things that I'm knowledgeable on the fact that I don't know. Like, I can't tell you how to make rocket fuel. I can't tell you how to build algorithms, but I'm aware of what these things are and I know that I don't know. But as for the things that I don't know, far, 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 far beyond my mind, right? Once you're aware of the fact that you don't know something, you start to look into the why, or why you don't know. Or you start to know, right? You start to do the research, you start to be mindful of the fact, I don't know this. What caused me to miss it? What caused me to go over this? What led to me not being aware of this, right? That is the why. When you don't know why you don't know something, you start to do the work and the research and the questioning and the process to know why you didn't know what you didn't know, right? Level 4 is the how. The structural process. Okay, you're now aware of why you didn't know something. Now, this level is where you start to break down the systems and the structural inefficiencies that led to you not being able to know something. So I can tell you, I don't know how to make rocket fuel because I'm not a fucking rocket scientist. That's why. As to how, well, I didn't go the route of studying physics or mathematics because I was not good at this. And so my interests lied in speaking and arts and other things as opposed to science. And I'm more of a I'm more of a horizontal instead of a vertical type of person. So it's hard for me to max out skill points in one area, such as rocket science or whatever. So, it's when you start to put pieces together, as opposed to having, okay, I don't know because this. The how is more so, I don't know because this, and then they come together like this. And then the 5th level of knowing or not knowing is knowing something. Once you put all these things together, once you go through all that work, you go through the process of breaking down all your biases and your ignorance, you understand something. That's when you finally know something, truly. Like I said, there's a difference between knowing and understanding. We've went over this. So those are the 5 levels of ignorance. And so just as the difference between knowing and understanding exists between hearing and listening, there's also 5 levels of listening. So first level of listening would be hearing. When the sound enters your ears and you hear something, you might not really pay any attention, but it's audible, right? That's the base level. The first level is to hear something. Now, you can hear something, and then the next level of hearing and listening would be you can pay attention to the words that are being said. I'm having a conversation with someone, or, I'm in class and my teacher's talking, or I'm reading a book. And I know plenty of times everyone's read a book and they read the words, especially out loud in class. They'll read the words fluently, but they have no clue what they're saying. And so they have to reread and go back and read the words slowly to try to make it make sense. It's just level 2 is basically on the surface where you can recognize the words, but they're still not really hitting. And so level 3 of knowing and understanding and listening is processing these words and actually making sense of what is being said. You know, if I'm reading Windows XP was an operating system, if I'm just reading to read, I'll never really process it. Or if I'm reading, let's say, an autobiography or something informational, I can literally read over it without knowing what it says. So level 3 is reading and now starting to integrate the words into the message that is behind the words, you know? So it's beginning to understand, beginning to actually realize what is being said and using your brain to process it. Level 4 requires you to look at the person who is giving the message, or essentially to put yourself in the place of the individual who's speaking so that you can see their perspective and you can see their message. So I now understand the words. Let's say I'm reading a book about George Washington Carver, right? I don't remember much about him, but I know he invented peanut butter or something like that. So, I've now gone through the work of reading. I see the words. I understand what's being said. Now I'm using my information of who I know is speaking, and then I get it from the perspective that he's trying to relay. So that gives me a deeper level of understanding the words because I now know who's saying the words. For example, if Elon Musk is talking about, I don't know, science or building cars or starting a business, I'm going to listen to him because he knows a thing or two or three. Whereas if he's speaking about, I don't know, how to get good at MMA, I'm not going to do the same level of listening. So level 4 is just synthesizing and recognizing the person behind the message. That now allows you to get a deeper level of understanding. And now the 5th level of listening is being able to explain it yourself. Now that these words have been fully realized, until you can explain something to a 12-year-old, you really don't know what you're talking about. So once these ideas or things or this information that you consume is officially locked into your mind, you understand it and you can translate it into your own words, as opposed to just memorizing and repeating information like homework or like a textbook. You now really understand it. You know what you're talking about, and putting it into your own words and being able to explain it simply is the number one indicator. Is the number one indicator of this. So level 5 of listening is you've integrated it fully and you can translate it into your own words. So now we can get into the 5 principles or the 5 tenets of being a good speaker. Number 1 is clarity. You must know what you're talking about. You must know who you're talking to. You must have a message, and you should know the importance of your words. This is essentially very simple, right? You need a reason to speak at least, or you need to know who you're speaking to, and you have to be able to say something, right? That's the foundation. For example, I'm reading. I don't memorize things. These are just my notes. For example, if I'm explaining the concept of discipline to a bunch of 12-year-olds, I'm not going to jump into neurotransmitters and the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. They're 12 years old. They don't know what the fuck that is, right? So naturally, if I am to introduce something like this, I have to make it digestible. And this is the part where this is level 5. You have to understand it. You have to put it into different words. You have to be able to break it down without just repeating the dictionary definition. So rather than start off with all those science terms, if I'm speaking to 12-year-olds about discipline, I'd probably start off with questions like, what is discipline? Or what does discipline look like? Or what's the difference between discipline and motivation? Then I'd go and introduce it to 12-year-olds like, discipline is the ability to make really hard things that people don't like doing really easy. It isn't something that you can wake up with one day, like motivation. So that's the difference between motivation and discipline. Motivation is constantly changing. You can get 3 a.m. motivation. You can get motivation like this. But discipline isn't like that, because there's times when you're not motivated and you're not able to do what you want to do. Whereas there's times where you're super motivated and it becomes easy to do what you want to do. So you can't really buy discipline. Discipline is only something you can obtain after you go to war with yourself internally. And so that is clarity. That is knowing who you're speaking to, having a message to relay in accordance with who you are speaking to, clearly knowing what you're going to talk about, and being meticulous and methodical with your words. The next one is conviction. Conviction is having a reason behind your message. Your message is the what, but conviction is the result of a why or a how. It's different from just having a message. It's having an ulterior motive to your message. So I'm speaking to 12-year-olds about discipline. That is, having the message. But the reason behind it is because the man is struggling today more than ever in this society. Man is lost. Man is off of purpose. Man is falling into hedonism. Man, the nuclear family is being destroyed. It is a calamity between men and women of today. And so this is like the proper reasoning, because all the education starts, teach someone how to be a man in their youth. When you instill the proper principles of, basic things like discipline and responsibility and accountability for their actions. In this example, my reason behind speaking to 12-year-olds is because young men today are struggling more than ever, and they need guidance in these young days so that they can have a good foundation when they approach the age of adulthood, right? So that's the why as a response to the what. For example, civil rights activists did not speak from beach houses with margaritas and shallow water and marble countertops. The reason behind their message was a result of hundreds of years of oppression and them fighting for a better tomorrow. Like, people were literally getting killed for speaking or for learning how to read or things like that. So their justification in speaking, their reason for these messages had a big why behind it. The wise man speaks because he has something to say, whereas the fool speaks because he has to say something. Conviction is having a big reason behind your speech. Next level is confidence. This is, clear. You have to believe in what you're saying. You have to believe in yourself. To declare that you don't have confidence requires confidence, because everybody is confident at something. Just explain to your friend something about a show you like, or explain why you like this instead of that, or explain why you think LeBron James is better than Michael Jordan, right? Everybody, even the least confident people, have something that they are confident in. You can channel this. You can go back to your childhood when you were in 3rd grade and you took a trip to the Bronx Zoo and it sparked a newfound interest in animals, but more specifically, reptiles. And then think about that time where you were talking to your mom and explaining to her how people often confuse alligators for crocodiles and vice versa, when in reality the differences between the two are quite noteworthy. For example, alligators are typically black or gray. Alligators typically reside in fresh water, areas like southeastern United States, like Florida, for example. They are also less violent than crocodiles. And the difference between the two as well, when an alligator has its mouth closed, you can only see the top teeth. Whereas the crocodile, on the other hand, varies in color as well. It can be olive, it can be tan, it can be green. They also reside in more saltwater areas or brackish water. And if you don't know what brackish water is, it's salt and fresh water. They are also more territorial than alligators. So, crocs will attack you more. Not that gators won't, but you can see in Florida, they tame gators like puppies. So, also, when they have their mouth closed, you can see their top and their bottom teeth, right? You are an 8-year-old. You are a third grader. You're not a biologist. You're not a conservationist with years of experience. You have a portion of knowledge, but because you're so enthusiastic about it, you're able to share it with great confidence. And, your parent might be a biologist, and you still explain it to her anyways, because you love to share this information, and there's no thought in the back of your mind, or there's no fear about stuttering or saying something wrong, because you've done your due diligence, right? Everybody is confident at something, That same way you can go off about 2 hours about why you don't. It requires confidence, and everybody has it. So don't think that you can't be confident or that you're not confident. And lastly, well, not lastly, I'm gonna just keep going. Authenticity, probably the most important one too. To be yourself. It's not about sounding perfect. It's not about being academic and being a dictionary. It's about conveying the message as you present it. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, it's all about bringing your ideas to other people. It's about making this invisible thing visible or tangible in a particular type of way. And the thought is entirely unique to you because of your life experiences, because of your internal dialogue, because of how you process information is entirely unique. So, for example, we all know what a tree is, but if I tell you to imagine a tree, we're not going to imagine it the same way. Somebody lives in Arizona, so he lives in the desert. Somebody only knows bamboo trees because he lives in Southeast Asia. Somebody thinks of a tree and they imagine an oak tree. But even in just an oak tree, there's differences. Multiple people can imagine the oak tree. One person can imagine it with a wide trunk, wide base. One person could imagine it with a narrow base. One person can imagine an oak tree in a different season. If it's fall, the leaves are orange, red, brown. But what type of brown? What type of red? What type of orange? What if it's not just tangerine? What if it's scarlet? The point is, we can imagine things. We can imagine the same things, but we imagine them very differently. And that goes exactly with our thoughts and the way we speak and how we relay messages. They're entirely unique to us, and that's actually a very good thing. Because when we express these things in our own unique ways, that is how you make people understand them the way that you do. Your uniqueness, your authenticity, is your gift. For example, extracting the words, the rhythm, and the cadence that make you is imperative to relaying a message. It's back to the stages of listening. When people start to look at the person who's giving the message, and that person expresses it authentically and unique to them, that really helps people extract the information. It really helps people listen. People admire authenticity because we live in an age where everyone wears a mask. Everyone is pretending to be someone they are not. So to be a good speaker, you don't have to be the most intelligent person. Often the best speakers are very good storytellers, not super nerds who know all the words in the dictionary, right? Lastly is connection. Clarity, conviction, connection, authenticity, and confidence. Clarity, conviction, confidence, connection, authenticity. Yes, connection. You have to be able to make connections. You have to be able to use examples. A good speaker is often able to make connections between things which don't seem connected. And I won't go into detail about it. I probably won't give you an example because to do that shit on the spot, I ain't there yet. But being able to reference, being able to take pieces of information and synthesize them and shape your message based on these different avenues, right? Good speakers are always able to make connections. You might bring an example. For example, I can tell you a story from high school about something, that it was very funny and I felt this way. And now, 5.5 years later, I noticed a pattern in my behavior that reminded me of this time. But nowadays, since I've gone through all the process of maturing and learning and becoming who I am, I don't have the same response. So though I'm in what seems to be the same position, it's not the same position. Because no man enters the same river twice, for it is not the same river, nor is he the same man. And yeah, that about concludes it. That is what makes someone a good speaker, in my humble opinion. Hope that you may enjoy.